Jessica was in the middle of finalizing a project proposal when her phone rang. Her mother's name flashed on the screen, and she hesitated before answering. Calls from her parents usually meant some drama involving her younger brother, Jake. "Hello," Jessica answered, trying to keep her voice neutral. "Tara." "Good, you picked up." Her mother's chipper voice came through. "Your father and I have been planning your birthday celebration. It's in 3 weeks, right? We've decided to host it at our house, just family and close relatives. Won't that be nice?" Jessica blinked in surprise. Her birthday, they actually remembered. "Oh, that's unexpected," she said carefully. "I was actually thinking of celebrating at that new Italian restaurant downtown with some friends from work." "Nonsense," her mother cut her off. "I've already invited everyone, your aunts, uncles, cousins, they're all coming. You should be grateful we're taking care of everything." Jessica sighed, recognizing the familiar tone. There was no point arguing when her mother used that voice. "Sure, Mom. Thanks for organizing everything." After hanging up, Jessica stared at her phone in disbelief. In 30 years, her parents had never shown this much interest in her birthday. Growing up, her celebrations were always modest affairs, a small cake, maybe a new book if she was lucky. Jake, on the other hand, got elaborate parties with themes, bounce houses, and expensive gifts. She still remembered her 16th birthday. She'd been hoping for driving lessons, which her parents had promised, but instead they gave her a $20 gift card to a bookstore and said they needed to save money. 3 years later, they bought Jake a used car for his 16th birthday. He totaled it within 3 weeks, and they replaced it without a single complaint. When Jessica moved out at 18, she promised herself she'd never expect anything from them again. She worked through college, took extra jobs, and slowly built her career as a project manager at a marketing firm. Their blatant favoritism had at least taught her self-reliance. So why were they suddenly interested in celebrating her birthday? Part of her wanted to believe they'd finally realized how unfair they'd been all these years. Maybe they were trying to make amends. It seemed unlikely, but perhaps turning 30 had made them reflect on how they treated her. Jessica turned back to her computer, pushing aside thoughts of her family as she focused on the project at hand. This proposal could mean a big commission if it went through, adding to her already growing savings. She closed 3 major projects in the past year, and each success had brought substantial bonuses. 2 months ago, she'd used those savings, plus the money she'd been setting aside for years, to buy her own apartment, mortgage-free and clear. It was a modest 2-bedroom in a decent neighborhood, nothing fancy, but it was the first place that ever truly felt like home. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "Heard Mom's planning your birthday. Sounds fun." Even this simple message carried a hint of the sarcasm that characterized most of their interactions. Jake was 27 now, but he still had the entitlement of the golden child. 3 years ago, he'd announced he was opening a tattoo parlor. Their parents had been so proud, even though Jake had no business experience and only mediocre artistic talent. They'd helped him with the initial investment, of course. From his social media, you'd think he was extraordinarily successful. His Instagram was filled with photos of exotic vacations, expensive clothes, and beautiful women. Each post was carefully crafted to project the image of a prosperous entrepreneur. Jessica suspected the reality was quite different. For the next 3 weeks, she threw herself into work, trying not to think too much about the upcoming birthday dinner. When Friday finally arrived, she left work early to get ready. She chose a simple blue dress, professional but festive, and drove to her parents' suburban home, the same house where she'd grown up. Cars lined the driveway and street. She recognized her Aunt Lisa's sedan and Uncle Mark's pickup truck. As she approached the door, she took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. Her mother opened it with a bright smile. "There's our birthday girl. Come in, come in. Everyone's waiting." The living room was filled with relatives she hadn't seen in months or years. Aunt Lisa hugged her tightly. "Tara, it's been too long. You look wonderful." Uncle Mark patted her shoulder. "Heard you bought yourself an apartment recently, mortgage-free. Huh, that's impressive." Thanks, Jessica smiled, genuinely pleased by their recognition. It had taken years of saving, but it felt good to have a place that was completely hers. From across the room, she noticed Jake's face. He was slouched in an armchair, looking at his phone. When Uncle Mark mentioned her apartment, Jake glanced up with a grimace before returning to his screen. The evening progressed pleasantly. They ate her mother's lasagna, her favorite, which she rarely made, and the conversation flowed. Relatives asked about her job and congratulated her on her apartment. Several commented on how responsible she'd always been. Remember when Tara was only 12 and she started that little neighborhood dog walking business? Aunt Lisa reminisced. Always the entrepreneur. Jessica smiled, enjoying the rare attention. Jake remained mostly silent, occasionally typing on his expensive new phone, a model she knew cost well over $1,000. After dinner, her mother announced it was time for presents. Everyone gathered around as Jessica opened gifts. Most were simple but thoughtful: a scarf from Aunt Lisa, a gift card from her cousins. When she got to her parents' gift, it was a large box wrapped in silver paper. "This is from us and Jake," her mother said. Inside was a high-end coffee maker, not the most personal gift, but certainly useful. "Thank you," Jessica said, genuinely appreciative. "This is great." As the evening wound down, relatives began to leave. With each goodbye hug, she felt more relaxed. Maybe her parents really were trying to mend their relationship. This birthday hadn't been extravagant, but it had been normal, and that alone felt like a gift. Once everyone had left except for her parents, and Jake, she started gathering her things. "Thanks for hosting, Mom. This was nice." "Wait, Tara," her mother said, her expression suddenly serious. "We need to talk to you about something important." "Sit down, please." The shift in her tone made Jessica's stomach tighten, but she took a seat on the couch. Her father joined her mother on the love seat opposite her, while Jake lounged in a nearby chair, still absorbed in his phone. "What's going on?" Jessica asked, her earlier contentment rapidly fading. Her mother and father exchanged a look before her mother spoke. "It's about Jake. He's having some financial difficulties." Jessica arrived at her parents' suburban home on the evening of her birthday dinner. Cars lined the driveway and spilled onto the street her Aunt Lisa's sedan, Uncle Mark's pickup truck, and a few others she recognized from family gatherings over the years. As she approached the front door, she took a deep breath, steeling herself for the evening ahead. Her mother greeted her with an overly bright smile and ushered her inside. The living room buzzed with conversation. Relatives mingled, sipping wine or soda, nibbling on appetizers. Jessica exchanged hugs and polite small talk, feeling both comforted by the familiarity and uneasy about the underlying tension she knew would surface later. Relatives complimented Jessica on her recent achievements, particularly her new apartment. "Aunt Lisa gushed, 'Tara, is so impressive that you bought your place outright. Not many people can do that these days.' Uncle Mark chimed in, 'Yeah, you've always been the responsible one. Remember when you were 12 and started that dog walking business, always the entrepreneur?' While the praise felt validating, subtle comparisons to Jake lingered beneath the surface. Someone mentioned how Jake had visionary ideas even though his tattoo parlor was struggling. Jessica noticed Jake slouching in an armchair, scrolling through his phone. When Uncle Mark brought up her apartment again, Jake glanced up briefly, grimacing before returning to his screen. After dinner, the family gathered around as Jessica opened her presents. Most gifts were thoughtful but modest: a scarf from Aunt Lisa, a gift card from her cousins. When she reached her parents' gift, her mother announced, "This is from us and Jake." Inside was a high-end coffee maker, not the most personal gift, but certainly useful. "Thank you," Jessica said, genuinely appreciative. "This is great." As the evening wound down, relatives began to leave. With each goodbye hug, she felt more relaxed. Maybe her parents really were trying to mend their relationship. This birthday hadn't been extravagant, but it had been normal, and that alone felt like a gift. Once everyone had left except for Jessica, her parents, and Jake, she started gathering her things. "Thanks for hosting, Mom. This was nice." "Wait, Tara," her mother said, her expression suddenly serious. "We need to talk to you about something important." "Sit down, please." The shift in her tone sent a chill through Jessica. She hesitated, then took a seat on the couch. Her father joined her mother on the love seat opposite her, while Jake lounged in a nearby chair, still absorbed in his phone. "What's going on?" Jessica asked, her earlier contentment rapidly fading. Her mother and father exchanged a look before her mother spoke. "It's about Jake. He's having some financial difficulties." A few years ago, when Jake opened his tattoo parlor, he took out loans for business development. Her father jumped in, explaining that the business hadn't been doing as well as expected, and now Jake was struggling to keep up with the payments. "How bad is it?" Jessica asked cautiously. Her mother and father exchanged another look. "His debts are around $200,000, her mother finally said. $200,000. Jessica gasped. That was more than she'd paid for her entire apartment. How is that even possible? Jake finally looked up from his phone. "Business costs add up," he said defensively. "Equipment, rent, advertising. And why are you telling me this? Jessica asked, though a sinking feeling in her stomach suggested she already knew the answer. Her father cleared his throat. We think you should help your brother pay off his debts. You should sell your apartment. That will cover Jake's debts and give him a fresh start. The room went silent. Jessica stared at her parents, waiting for them to crack a smile to let her know they were kidding. But their expressions remained serious. You want me to sell my apartment, which I saved for years to buy to bail out Jake? Her voice was quiet but strained. Help your brother, her father said firmly. Family helps family. Jessica looked at Jake, who had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable though he was still texting someone, the ghost of a smile playing on his lips. This isn't happening, she muttered, standing up. I'm not selling my apartment. That's insane. Jake's head snapped up. What? What a terrible sister you are, he spat. I can't be serious, Jessica said, looking from Jake to her parents. He has a yacht, for God's sake. I've seen the pictures. He drives a Porsche. Why doesn't he sell those? Those are important for my image as a businessman, Jake said, suddenly animated. I can't sacrifice my professional appearance. How would that look to potential clients? And my home isn't important, Jessica shot back. The home I worked for years to afford. You're being selfish, her mother said, her voice rising. Jake needs our help, her father added. As his older sister, you should support him. And what about all the support you've given him over me his entire life? The words burst out before she could stop them. The cars, the vacations, the business investment that wasn't enough. That's different, her father said dismissively. He's had different needs than you. Different needs, Jessica echoed in disbelief. When I needed braces, you told me we couldn't afford them. 6 months later, Jake got an expensive gaming system for Christmas. When I needed help with college tuition, you said I should take out loans. But when Jake wanted to start a tattoo parlor with zero experience, you handed him thousands? Stop exaggerating, her mother snapped. We've always treated you both fairly. Jessica took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. I'm not selling my apartment, she said firmly. Her mother's face hardened. She stood up, walked to the coffee table, and grabbed the box containing the coffee maker they'd given her earlier. Then you don't deserve gifts from us, she said coldly, pulling the box away. Jessica stared at her in shock. Even for her, this was cruel. I think you should leave, her father said, standing beside her mother. If you can't support your brother in his time of need, you don't deserve to be part of this family. You don't deserve to be our daughter, her mother added, her voice ice. Jake watched this exchange with a smug expression that made Jessica's blood boil. Fine, she said, grabbing her purse and jacket. I'm going home to the apartment I earned, that I own, and that I am absolutely not selling. Get out, her mother hissed. Just get out. Jessica walked to the door with as much dignity as she could muster. None of them followed her as she stepped outside. She heard the door slam behind her. The drive home was a blur. Her phone kept buzzing with texts, but she ignored them until she was safely inside her apartment. When she finally looked, she wished she hadn't. Her mother's messages were accusatory. You ungrateful girl. After everything we've done for you? Her father's texts were filled with disappointment. Your selfishness is disgusting. Think about what matters more, your brother's future or your own greed. Jake had sent the most hurtful messages. Have fun being alone in your precious apartment. Maybe you can cuddle with your mortgage papers since no man would want to live with such a selfish witch. It must be nice being so ugly inside. At least it matches your outside. You'll die alone in that apartment. Congrats on the great investment. Jessica threw her phone onto the couch and burst into tears. Happy birthday to me, she muttered bitterly. After a good cry, she dragged herself to the bathroom and splashed cold water on her face. In the mirror, her eyes were red and puffy, but as she stared at her reflection, a strange calm began to replace her hurt. What had she really lost tonight? Parents who had never prioritized her, a brother who only saw her as a potential ATM, some family. She made herself a cup of tea and sat at her kitchen table, thinking. For the past year, she'd been sending her parents $1,200, every month $700 for the loan on their new car, and $500 for household bills. They never asked for this help. She'd offered it because she thought that's what family did for each other. She opened her banking app and navigated to the recurring transfer section. With 2 clicks, she canceled both monthly payments. It felt both terrifying and liberating. Then she opened her laptop and began typing an email to her parents. Mom and Dad, Since you made it clear that you don't consider me your daughter anymore, I won't continue to financially support strangers. The monthly transfers for your car loan and household bills have been canceled effective immediately. If Jake's financial future is so important to you, perhaps you can redirect the $1,200 per month you'll now be responsible for toward his debts instead. Please don't contact me again. Tara. She hit send before she could change her mind. Then she turned off her phone, took a long, hot shower, and went to bed. Tomorrow was Saturday, thankfully. She didn't think she could face work after tonight. The confrontation at the office left Jessica feeling a mix of emotions: relief, defiance, and a lingering sense of unease. Her parents' threats had been hollow, but their desperation was undeniable. For years, they had relied on her financial support without ever acknowledging her sacrifices. Now that she cut them off, they were forced to face the consequences of their choices and Jake's failures. A week after the office incident, Aunt Lisa called during one of their regular weekend chats. After catching up on lighter topics, Lisa shared some updates about the family. The bank repossessed your parents' car last week, Lisa said. They couldn't keep up with the payments without your help. Jessica listened quietly, feeling a twinge of something not quite guilt, but more like acknowledgement. And Jake had to sell his Porsche and that ridiculous boat of his, Lisa continued. Still didn't cover all his debts, but it made a dent. He's moved back in with your parents now. Is he still looking for work? Jessica asked. Actually, yes, he's got interviews lined up at a few places downtown. Nothing fancy, just regular jobs. Jessica smiled to herself. A normal job with regular hours might be exactly what Jake needed. After hanging up, Jessica grabbed her camera, a recent purchase that had quickly become her passion, and headed to the city park. Photography had become her weekend escape, a way to see beauty in the world around her. As she framed a shot of an elderly couple feeding ducks by the pond, she felt a sense of contentment wash over her. Her life was hers now, shaped by her choices, her values, her desires. For the first time in 30 years, she was truly free. But the peace didn't last long. The following Wednesday, Jessica was at her desk reviewing a client proposal when her office phone rang. It was Sam, the security guard from the lobby. Miss Mitchell, there's a couple here insisting they need to see you. They say they're your parents. Jessica's heart raced. I don't want to see them, Sam. Please don't let them up. No problem. Should I ask them to leave the premises? Yes, please. She hesitated, then sighed. But tell them I'll come down to the lobby. I'll speak to them there for 5 minutes, but that's it. She took the elevator down, mentally preparing herself. When the doors opened, she saw her parents standing by the security desk. Her mom's eyes were red and her dad looked haggard. You have 5 minutes, Jessica said coldly, leading them to a corner of the lobby away from curious ears. This has gone far enough, her dad began. Your aunt has been telling everyone your version of events, and now the whole family is treating us like we're monsters. My version? Jessica laughed bitterly. You mean the truth? You're exaggerating everything, her mom hissed. We were just asking for your help and you've turned it into this character assassination. I showed Aunt Lisa the messages you sent me, Jessica replied calmly. Your exact words calling me ugly, saying I'd die alone. Was that an exaggeration? They exchanged uncomfortable glances. We were upset, her dad muttered. People say things they don't mean when they're upset. The way I see it, you finally said what you've always thought of me, Jessica said. Her mom's face contorted with anger. This isn't about ancient history, Tara. This is about now. Your brother needs help. And instead of supporting him, you've destroyed our reputation with the family. You destroyed your own reputation by lying about me, Jessica countered, and by treating me like garbage my entire life. That's not true, her mom protested. We've always loved you the same as Jake. The blatant lie made Jessica laugh. Sure, Mom. That's why Jake got a car at 16 while I got a gift card. That's why you paid for his business but told me to take out loans for college. You've always been independent, her dad said weakly. Jake needs to grow up and face the consequences of his actions, Jessica said firmly. And so do you. Her mom's face hardened. Fine. If that's how you want to play this, we'll make your life hell. We'll call you from different numbers, email you from new accounts, show up where you work. Sarah, her dad warned, glancing nervously at the security guard who was watching them closely. No, Bill. I'm done playing nice, her mom continued, her voice rising. We'll come to her home, we'll contact her friends. We won't stop until she helps Jake and starts supporting us again. Jessica was tired of their arrogance, their entitlement, their constant emotional manipulation. They really thought they could bully her into giving up everything she'd worked for. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number. "Who are you calling?" her dad demanded. "Mark Donovan," Jessica replied calmly. "He's our corporate attorney. I've already discussed my family situation with him." Her mom's face went pale. "You're calling a lawyer on your own parents." "Hello, Mark," Jessica said into the phone. "It's Tara Mitchell. Remember that family harassment situation I mentioned? They're here at my office right now threatening me. Could you come down to the lobby?" She paused, listening. "Thanks. I appreciate it." She ended the call and looked at her parents. "He'll be here in 2 minutes." "We wouldn't," actually her mom began, but fell silent as a well-dressed man in his 50s approached them. "Tara," he nodded to her, then turned to her parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, I'm Mark Donovan, corporate counsel for this company and a personal friend of your daughter's." "This is a family matter," her dad said stiffly. "It doesn't concern you?" "Actually, it does," Mark replied. "Tara has already shown me the threatening messages you've sent her. Now you've come to her workplace to continue that harassment. Let me be very clear. If you continue to contact Tara against her wishes by phone, email, in person, or through third parties, we will pursue a restraining order and, if necessary, criminal charges." "You wouldn't," her mom whispered, looking at Jessica. "Try me," Jessica replied steadily. "I'm done being your punching bag." "All communication from this point should go through me," Mark continued, handing them each his business card. "Have a good day." Her parents stood frozen for a moment, then turned and walked out without another word, disappearing through the glass doors. Jessica watched them get into their car, not the new one they bought with her help, but an older model she didn't recognize. "You okay?" Mark asked after they'd driven away. "Yeah," Jessica said, surprised to find she meant it. "I think I am." After the confrontation at the office, her parents never bothered her again. The legal warning from Mark had worked like a charm, and her life became wonderfully peaceful. No more drama, no more demands, no more guilt trips. One Saturday morning, Aunt Lisa called her for their weekly chat. "Thought you'd want to know," Lisa said after they caught up on normal things. "Jake's working now at a marketing firm downtown. Entry-level position, but he seems to be taking it seriously." "That's good to hear," Jessica said. "It's about time he grew up," Lisa added. "Anyway, I'll let you go. Enjoy your weekend." After they hung up, Jessica grabbed her camera and headed to the city park. As she framed a shot of a bird taking flight, she reflected on her journey. Freedom wasn't the absence of pain, it was choosing how to carry it. And for the first time, she felt light. After the confrontation at her office, Jessica's life became quieter than she'd ever imagined. Her parents never contacted her again after Mark Donovan's stern warning. For weeks, she waited for another attempted phone call from an unknown number, a surprise visit to her apartment, but nothing came. It was as if they'd vanished from her life entirely. At first, the silence felt strange, almost unnatural. She had spent so many years navigating their demands, managing their crises, and enduring their emotional manipulation that their absence left a void. But as days turned into weeks, that void began to fill not with loneliness, but with something else: peace. Without the constant drain of worrying about her family, Jessica found herself more focused at work and sleeping better at night. She closed another major project ahead of schedule, earning praise from her boss and securing a new client everyone had been trying to land for months. "You've been on fire lately," her colleague Rachel commented during lunch one day. "What's your secret?" Jessica smiled. "I guess I finally stopped carrying everyone else's baggage." Photography, which had started as a casual hobby, became her weekend escape. She spent hours wandering through parks, capturing fleeting moments of beauty, sunlight filtering through trees, children laughing on swings, birds taking flight. Each photograph felt like a small act of reclaiming her life, piece by piece. One Saturday morning, Aunt Lisa called during their weekly chat. After catching up on lighter topics, Lisa shared some updates about the family. "The bank repossessed your parents' car last week," Lisa said. "They couldn't keep up with the payments without your help." Jessica listened quietly, feeling a twinge of something not quite guilt, but more like acknowledgement. "And Jake had to sell his Porsche and that ridiculous boat of his," Lisa continued. "Still didn't cover all his debts, but it made a dent. He's moved back in with your parents now." "Is he still looking for work?" Jessica asked. Actually, yes, he's got interviews lined up at a few places downtown. Nothing fancy, just regular jobs. Jessica smiled to herself. A normal job with regular hours might be exactly what Jake needed. As time passed, Jessica realized how much energy she'd wasted over the years trying to fix problems that weren't hers to solve. Her decision to cut ties hadn't just freed her financially, it had given her emotional space to grow. She started saying yes to things she'd once dismissed as impractical or selfish. When Rachel invited her on a weekend trip to the coast, Jessica agreed without hesitation. For years, she declined such invitations, fearing her parents might need her for some emergency. Now, she packed her camera and enjoyed 2 days of ocean views, laughter, and freedom. On the drive home, Rachel glanced at her. You seem different lately. Happier. Maybe I am, Jessica replied thoughtfully. For the first time, I feel like my life is mine to live. One evening, as she sat on her balcony watching the sunset, Jessica reflected on everything that had happened. Selling her apartment would have meant sacrificing not just her home, but her independence, the very thing she'd fought so hard to build. She thought about her parents' accusations, their attempts to guilt her into compliance. They had always treated her support as a given, never acknowledging her sacrifices. And when she finally stood up for herself, they labeled her selfish and cruel. But deep down, she knew the truth. She wasn't selfish for wanting to keep what she'd earned. She wasn't cruel for refusing to enable their dysfunction. She was human for setting boundaries, for choosing herself, for learning to carry her pain differently. Months later, Jessica received a letter from Aunt Lisa. Inside was a photo of her parents' old house taken from across the street. In the background, she could see Jake mowing the lawn while their mother watered flowers in the front yard. Things are changing, Lisa wrote. Your brother seems to be taking responsibility for the first time. Your parents are adjusting to living within their means. I know you don't want to reconnect right now, but I wanted you to know they're growing, even if it's slow. Jessica stared at the photo for a long time. She didn't feel anger anymore, just a quiet sadness mixed with hope. Maybe someday, when enough time had passed, she could consider reaching out, or maybe not. Either way, she knew she wouldn't let their choices define her future. That weekend, she drove to a nearby nature reserve with her camera. As she framed a shot of a bird perched on a branch, ready to take flight, she thought about freedom, not just from her family, but within herself. Life wasn't perfect, and healing wasn't linear. But for the first time, Jessica felt like she was flying, not weighed down by expectations, guilt, or resentment.